Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. I hope you guys are all having a wonderful Monday. Today is April 25th, 2022, and today we're going to be talking about the Chimera Crested Gecko. You may be wondering, what is a chimera and what does it have to do with crested geckos? Well, a chimera is a mutation that can happen naturally in all different species of animals, and as some of you know, I've been working on this project over the last couple of years that I named the 2 Base Color Project. I now know that that is incorrect, and what I was actually working with is a chimera. So today we're going to talk about chimeras, Chimera Crested Geckos, my Chimera Crested Gecko and the history of him, some breeding things, some genetic things, and the future plans I have with this project and what it all means in the end. But without further ado, let's jump right into it, and I think it's important that before we talk about my gecko specifically and other geckos like it, that we talk about what a chimera actually is and how they are formed. This is going to come in handy later on when we're talking about breeding and genetics, and it'll hopefully all make sense at the end of this video. A side note before we begin that is that there is no information, and I mean absolutely none, about Chimera Crested Geckos and their habits and breeding them and anything like that anywhere on the internet. So a lot of the information I've had to research over the last month or two has been relating to human chimeras, because chimeras can form in all different species of animals, including humans. And we may not have realized it, but we've been looking at them all the time. Like, I'm sure some of you have seen the pictures online of people with 2 different colored eyes, like a bright blue and a brown, or maybe the 2 different colored lobsters that they find every now and then with like half orange and half black. And there are different types of chimeraism. I'm not even sure if that's a word, but we're going to roll with it anyway. Chimeraism, where it can be like half the body or splotches or that kind of thing. But in this video, we're just looking at a general overview of it because we don't really need to focus on all the specifics like that. So again, since there is no research about crested gecko chimeras specifically, a lot of the information I'm using is from humans, and take into consideration that humans and crested geckos, especially in reproduction, is vastly different. So a lot of this information still applies, but I'm just having to convert it to crested gecko format basically, so that it makes sense. But I'm going to be using some handy dandy graphics here to hopefully explain this a little bit better. So you'll see on the left side of your screen, I have a blue circle which represents one sibling and a red circle on the other side which represents another sibling. So in a normal situation, both of these would be fertilized eggs that would come down and they would form and grow and grow and grow, and then eventually turn into 2 normal crested geckos, one red in this case and one blue, right? So that's a normal situation that happens all the time, every day. A chimera is a little bit different because early on in the stages of development, one of the siblings will likely pass away, and it could be a twin as well, but most likely a sibling will pass away, and then the other sibling that's still alive will absorb the rest of its cells, and this is very early on in its development. So one of the siblings will die and the other one will absorb all its cells and its DNA. And this is very important because remember, normally one animal has 1 set of DNA. A chimera has 2 sets of DNA, and that is very important later on in the video. I also specifically used red and blue to represent this because red and blue, if you were thinking about paint, would make purple, right? So you have this full-grown animal that has 2 different sets of DNA. Let's just pretend it's red and blue in this case. And you might think, does that make like 1 strand of purple DNA? And it does not. While yes, all the DNA in the body is mixed up all together, all jumbled up, it is not combined. It is not purple. It's still red and blue. So there's 2 separate sets of DNA within Hellboy that is causing him to display the 2 different base colors, in this case lavender and red. They are not mixed together. They are completely separate inside of his body. So to put it into simple terms, basically what it is one sibling absorbs the other early on in the stages of development, and it forms into one gecko, in this case, with 2 different sets of DNA, and it's being displayed in his 2 different base colors, red and lavender. Another thing about chimeras is that in this case, it's obviously being displayed through his skin. However, sometimes it is not displayed at all, and there's no way to tell that it's a chimera. And like in humans, some of you may have seen the article, and I read this article actually when doing this research, but there's been people who've taken paternity tests and not been related to their children because they didn't know that they were chimeras, and their children got a separate set of DNA from them. So even though their own children, they came out of them, they're not technically related because the father or parent or whoever was a chimera and they didn't realize it. Another question I had, of course, when talking about mutations is, does this affect any sort of deformity? You know, obviously Hellboy is a very normal looking gecko, but if you were to get another chimera, is it going to be deformed? And the answer is most likely not, because This happens so early on in development that these are cells forming together and becoming one animal. So just to recap, being a chimera is a natural process. It can happen naturally. It always doesn't have to be displayed, but in our case it is. And then the most important thing is that Hellboy has 2 sets of DNA and all chimeras have 2 sets of DNA. Those are the main takeaways from this and how chimeras are made and what they are. So now before we go any farther into the video, let's answer the question that a lot of you are here for. Can you create 2 base color animals from a chimera like this? And the answer is no, you cannot. And let me explain. So like we just got done talking about, chimeras have 2 different sets of DNA that are, yes, they're mixed up in the body, but they are not one set. They are 2 different sets of DNA in the body, right? So when a chimera reproduces, it is only giving one set or the other set to its offspring. It's not giving purple DNA, it's giving a red or a blue, if that makes sense. So unfortunately, the answer is no. You cannot create 2 base color animals using chimeras, mine or anybody else's, so don't let them trick you into that if you find anyone else with a chimera. And that's just one of the unfortunate things that I've learned over the last couple months. So unfortunately, this project is pretty much over. However, there is something else cool about chimeras, which I did not realize going into this project, that I'm going to explain to you in a little bit. So unfortunately, 2 base color animals are out of the question. They're only getting one set or the other of the parent's DNA. But now let's jump into a little bit of history about my chimera, Hellboy, where he came from, how I got him, what's going on with them, and future plans that I have with them. So Hellboy was purchased from Brian over at Altitude Exotics, late 2019, I want to say. Brian, as you all know, is always working on the craziest, coolest new crested gecko morphs. At the time of this recording, it happens to be the cappuccino, frappuccino, melanistic animals. But back then, this was a pretty cool animal, and I would say it still is to this day. Chimeras are pretty rare in the crested gecko world. But anyway, Brian put this up as kind of an unknown morph. And somewhere I have the screenshot of the original description, but he kind of put it up as a unique animal, the opportunity to possibly create something new, crazy, maybe a new morphic crested gecko. And at the time he was selling it, which would seem kind of odd. But anyway, Brian said that he had not bred this animal either. So this was a completely new opportunity to possibly create something mind-blowingly new and crazy in the crested gecko world. And you have to remember, at the time, really the only 2 things that were going on would have been like Axanthics probably and lily whites. So of course I had to jump on this project. The gecko wasn't terribly expensive either. It was one of the more expensive geckos I had purchased at the time. However, I thought, for the possible outcome of creating something new and unique, it was definitely worth it. So I picked it up late 2019, early 2020. Of course, I wanted to breed him. And I had him with, I believe, 2 females. And I don't remember the exact reason. Either he wouldn't lock or the eggs were not good. But whatever the reason was, I did not get any good eggs at all during 2020, which was very unfortunate because this was one of my big projects, one thing I was very excited about, and I did not get any good eggs. Fast forward to 2020, I put him with only 1 female because I didn't want to repeat of the previous year, but I put him with one of my good breeder females, Autumn, who's a kind of Halloween-ish gecko, and she's always been a good producer though. So I thought if he was going to have a hard time, she could maybe help him out a little bit and I'd get some good eggs. And I did. And I also put her with him because she's a nice dark base. He's a red animal. And obviously dark and red go good together. And one thing I forgot to mention is his parents, Rust Bucket and a red female. You can see here, his dad was an extreme Harlequin pinstripe. The mom was a normal looking red female, which is obvious because chimeras is a natural process. So they were nothing crazy and they created him, right? Anyway, back to the breeding. He had a bunch of good eggs this year. I don't know the exact number. I'd have to go back and count, but it was a good number of eggs. I would say like 10 eggs or so, right? Let's just make it 10 to make it easy. So let me show you some pictures here of his babies. So we got dark pinstripe, dark pinstripe, dark pinstripe, yet another dark pinstripe, red pinstripe. That's pretty normal. What you could be expecting out of a pair like this. He's a pinstripe, she's a dark, nothing out of the ordinary here, right? All's good. Near the end of the year, I believe his last 2 eggs, I hatched out these 2 animals. And you're thinking, are you sure those are his animals? Those are his babies? Yes, they are. I double checked the lay boxes. I double checked the eggs themselves because I keep all the eggshells and I write on them. These are in fact his babies. And so what I believe is going on here is all the first babies, let's say the first 8, were all his first set of stranded DNA. And the second one, these 2 tricolors, were from his second set of DNA. I believe that's what's going on here, although I don't completely understand why it wouldn't be more of a 50-50 split. You would think it'd be like 50% are getting one strand, 50% are getting the other. blah, blah, blah. Whatever the reason is, it was very 80-20-ish kind of. I only received these 2 low-grade tricolors. But nonetheless, that is very, very interesting to me because obviously Hellboy, when you really think about it, if you really break it down, he has 2 strands of DNA, which basically makes him like 2 geckos. He's basically 2 geckos in one body, which is very interesting because if you put him with another chimera, let's say you found another chimera who has 2 strands of DNA, you'd be pairing 2 animals together, but really it's like doing 4 animals, if that makes sense, because they each have 2. So you could get a crazy, crazy combo going on there if you could find another chimera. But like I said, they are extremely rare. And unfortunately, I don't really know of that many in the world. I know of like 4 total, and one of them is deceased. The other one was sold a couple years ago, and the other one was a post from like 2014. So right now, at the moment, this is the only one I really know about that I could locate. But I did want to talk to you a little bit about some other chimeras. So now that we know Hellboy can produce some crazy stuff, let's take a look at some other chimeras. And this was something I learned pretty recently, but Brian actually sold another chimera around the same time that I bought mine. And this was a red female, but it was red and yellow instead of red and lavender. I'm not sure where this gecko's at. It may not even be alive. Who knows where it's at? But anyway, it's a very cool chimera nonetheless. I'd say mine's a little bit cooler though. But anyway, another chimera that I'm fairly certain about is this one from Tip O Texas Geckos. Beautiful, beautiful male. Very similar to mine actually, except with spots and more lavender versus red base. But I'm fairly certain that this was a chimera. Unfortunately, this animal passed away about a year ago and she did not pair it before then. But I'm 99% sure this was a chimera. I'm very certain about it. Those are the only chimeras I really know about. There's some other older posts about some possible ones, but I'm not too certain about those. But if you know any of them and you could send me pictures of them on Facebook or Instagram, or let me know where I could find them down below in the comments, I'd be very interested to learn about it because right now this is one of the most rare, kind of cool mutations that I know about, other than some of the one-off animals like Mr. Shrimp, the Leucistic, Frazzle, the Interesting Dalmatian, which I'm sure you've all have seen those 2, and of course Patient Zero from Pangea. Those are some more of the interesting random mutations that we've seen. But this one is more, there's a couple more examples of it, which I think is pretty cool. At least like 3 to 5 of them in the world that I've seen. So that leads me into my final question of what are my plans with this guy in the future? Do I plan to sell him, keep him, breed him? What am I going to do? Well, the number one thing I'd like to do is, possibly find another chimera. However, I think that's very unlikely and probably they'd be asking way more than I want to pay for it. And frankly, there is a very unique factor to Hellboy, of course, because he's kind of rare and he's very cool and interesting. But there's also kind of a con factor in the fact that I could never really pair him in a normal pairing and know what I'm going to get or expect to get. Like in this example, I got a bunch of pins and tricolors. That doesn't really make a good breeder in a sense because like I could never pair him with an animal and be like, yep, I'm going to get mostly tricolors here. Because you don't really know which of his DNA is going to come out, if that makes sense. So while there's a cool factor because he's a chimera and also an interesting factor just because he's unique, on the other hand, he doesn't make a great breeder. But for the time being, I'm planning on keeping him around a little bit and, breeding him into some more projects, which leads me to my projects for this year in the 2022 season. I paired him with a patternless red female or a red phantom, however you want to look at it. And then I also paired him with a lily white to see how he interacts with the lily white gene. In theory, it shouldn't be anything unusual because he's just 2 geckos in one body normal. He's not creating any 2 base color animals or anything crazy like that. And I paired him with the red just to see what would happen because he produced these tricolors. And then it was very interesting because he produced almost all dark base pinstripes this year other than the one single one that I got that was red, which I thought was interesting because usually it's a more split. You're getting some reds, some blacks, that kind of thing. But that leads me to the end of this video. Hopefully this video was kind of interesting for you. I've learned a lot over the last couple months about these animals and just this mutation in general. I think it's very interesting and very cool and just sort of unique. But let me know down below. I'd really appreciate it if you know any other animals like this. I'd really like to get in contact with some people who own one possibly. So I'd appreciate that. But with that being said, hopefully you liked the video. If you did, drop a like on it. And with that, I hope to see you all in my next video. So I just finished editing the video you just got done watching, and I thought it'd be interesting to actually go back quickly and take a look at the original video I had made to see how many people had commented that it was a chimera all along, and I just decided not to Google it. So you can see This video was from December 9th, 2019. And look at literally the first comment. In the first 5 words, someone's like, it's a Chimera. And I don't know why I didn't Google it. I wish I could go back and just beat myself for not even Googling it to see what it was. You can chalk that up to probably being a pretty ignorant 19-year-old, I guess. But I feel a little wiser now, a little smarter, a little bit more educated on the topic. So I'm thankful I finally researched it. I don't know why it took me so long. It's one of my biggest gecko regrets at the moment. But let's see who else. Oh, there's another one said it's a Chimera. Anybody else? Oh, Paradox. Blah, blah. No. Yep, here's another one. This person actually is very correct. Kate Ball. Would only pass on one of the 2 base colors. She was right. Some of these people were right all along. I didn't listen to them, and here we are. Lesson learned. Lesson learned. But yeah, you guys can make fun of me about that in the comments. I know. I don't know what I was thinking. I should have Googled this a lot sooner. A lot sooner. But I just thought that was kind of funny, and yeah, I wanted to share that with you. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have a great day, and take care.